The homeless girl who graduated top of her class. The morning sun filtered through the cracked windshield of the 1998 Honda Civic, casting fragmented rainbows across Maya Chen's calculus textbook. She stirred in the back seat, her neck stiff from another night spent curled around her backpack, which held everything she owned. Outside the parking lot of the 24-hour Walmart was already beginning to fill with early shoppers, their purposeful strides a stark contrast to Maya's careful, calculated movements as she gathered her things. At 17, Maya had perfected the art of invisibility. She knew which gas station bathrooms had the best soap dispensers for washing her hair, which libraries stayed open latest, and which coffee shops had managers who looked the other way when she nursed a single cup of tea for hours while using their Wi-Fi. Most importantly, she knew how to keep her secret from everyone at Westfield High School, where she wasn't just another student. She was the student everyone expected to deliver the valedictorian speech in 3 months. The irony wasn't lost on her. While her classmates worried about college essays and prom dates, Maya worried about whether the car would start in the morning and if she'd have enough money for gas to make it through the week. The vehicle had been her home for the past 8 months, ever since her mother had lost her battle with cancer, and the medical bills had devoured their savings, their house, and ultimately their stability. Maya's father had left when she was 3, a ghost of a memory she couldn't quite grasp. Her mother, Lynn, had been everything provider, protector, and biggest cheerleader. An immigrant from Taiwan, Lynn had worked 2 jobs to keep them afloat, always insisting that education was the key to a better life. In America, she would say in her accented English, knowledge is the only thing they cannot take from you. Those words echoed in Maya's mind as she slipped into the Walmart bathroom with her toiletry bag. She had 30 minutes before the morning shift change, when new employees might notice she'd been there too long. With practiced efficiency, she washed her face, brushed her teeth, and changed into her school clothes, a carefully maintained rotation of outfits she washed at the laundromat every Sunday. The hardest part had been the beginning. After her mother's death, Maya had tried to stay with her aunt in Sacramento, but her uncle had made it clear she was a burden they couldn't afford. Child services had been called once, but Maya had learned to dodge them, knowing that entering the foster system at 17 would likely mean changing schools, losing her advanced placement classes, and kissing her dreams of college goodbye. So she made a choice. She would finish what her mother had started. She would graduate not just with honors, but at the top of her class. She would get into a good college with a full scholarship. She would break the cycle. At school, Maya was a phantom of normalcy. She arrived early using the computer lab to print assignments and charge her phone. She volunteered for every after-school activity that provided food debate club, with pizza student government, with sandwiches, tutoring sessions with snacks. Her teachers praised her dedication, never suspecting that her enthusiasm had as much to do with hunger as it did with academic passion. Maya, you're here early again. Mrs. Rodriguez, her AP literature teacher, observed one morning, finding Maya in the classroom at 7 a.m. I like the quiet, Maya replied, which wasn't a lie. The school was her sanctuary, the one place where she felt she belonged, where her circumstances didn't define her. Mrs. Rodriguez smiled, setting down her coffee. I wanted to talk to you about your college essay, the one about resilience. It's powerful, but it feels like you're holding back. The best essays are vulnerable, Maya. They show who you really are. Maya's stomach clenched. She had written about her mother's death, but had carefully omitted everything that came after. I'll work on it, she promised, knowing she wouldn't. Some truths were too heavy to share. The days blurred together in a routine of survival and study. Maya had memorized the schedules of every place that offered free resources. The public library was her office, open until 9 p.m. on weekdays. The community center had free showers on Tuesday and Thursday mornings if you arrived before 7 a.m. The Sikh temple served free meals on Sundays, no questions asked. She supplemented these with her part-time job at a local tutoring center, where she helped middle school students with math and science for $12 an hour, enough for gas, food, and the occasional luxury like new socks or shampoo. Her grades never wavered. If anything, they improved. While her classmates had Netflix and social media to distract them, Maya had only her textbooks and an unwavering determination. She threw herself into her studies with the desperation of someone who knew that every point on every test was a step toward a different life. The closest she came to being discovered was in February during an unexpected cold snap. The temperature dropped below freezing and Maya's car wouldn't start. She had wrapped herself in every piece of clothing she owned, but By morning, she could barely feel her fingers. She arrived at school shivering uncontrollably, her lips tinged blue. My God, Maya, you're freezing, exclaimed Mr. Thompson, her calculus teacher, as she entered his classroom. Didn't you wear a coat? I forgot it, she lied through chattering teeth. He immediately wrapped his own jacket around her shoulders and made her sit by the heater. You need to take better care of yourself, he said, concern evident in his voice. You're pushing yourself too hard. If only he knew, Maya thought, clutching the jacket tighter. The warmth was so overwhelming that she had to blink back tears. She kept the jacket for the rest of the day, memorizing the feeling of being warm, and returned it after school with profuse thanks. That night, she used some of her precious savings to buy a sleeping bag rated for cold weather. It was an investment in survival, she told herself, even as she calculated how many meals she'd have to skip to make up for it. March brought new challenges. Prom season meant conversations about dresses and limos, after parties, and hotels. Maya watched from the sidelines, her poverty a wall between her and the normal teenage experiences she craved. When pressed about her plans, she claimed she thought prom was overrated, that she'd rather spend the night studying for AP exams. You're going to regret not going, her friend Alicia insisted over lunch. Senior prom only happens once. So does getting into a good college, Maya countered, forcing a smile. Besides, I'll have plenty of parties in college. What she didn't say was that the cost of a prom ticket alone was more than she spent on food in a week. The dress, shoes, hair, makeup, it might as well have been a trip to the moon. As graduation approached, so did the parade of college acceptances. Maya watched her classmates celebrate their futures, UCLA, Berkeley, Stanford, while she waited anxiously for the only letters that mattered, the ones that came with full scholarships. She had applied to 20 schools, each application fee waived due to her low-income status, one of the few benefits of her situation. The first acceptance came from State University with a partial scholarship. Maya did the math and felt her heart sink. Even with the scholarship, the remaining costs were impossible. The second came from a private college back east acceptance, but no financial aid. One by one, the letters arrived, each a combination of pride and disappointment. Then, on a Thursday afternoon in April, the email came. Stanford University, full scholarship, room and board included. Maya was in the library when she read it, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to cry. Not the silent tears of exhaustion or grief she had become accustomed to, but full body-shaking sobs of relief. The librarian, Mrs. Foster, rushed over in alarm. Maya, honey, what's wrong? Nothing, Maya managed between sobs. Everything's right. Everything's finally right. Word of her Stanford acceptance spread through school like wildfire. Teachers stopped her in the halls to congratulate her. Classmates who had barely noticed her existence suddenly wanted to know her secret. The principal announced it over the intercom, embarrassing her with the attention, but also filling her with a pride she hadn't felt since her mother was alive. But with the joy came new anxieties. There were forms to fill out, deposits to make, orientations to attend. Each required an address, emergency contacts, parental information. Maya became an expert at creative truth-telling, using the tutoring center as her mailing address, listing her boss as an emergency contact, explaining her parents' absence with half-truths about work schedules and travel. The final stretch of senior year was bittersweet. As her classmates grew increasingly distracted by senioritis, Maya remained focused. She had come too far to stumble now. She continued her grueling schedule, saving every penny for the transition to college, researching summer programs that would let her move into the dorms early. 2 weeks before graduation, disaster struck. Maya returned to her car after school to find a notice tucked under the windshield wiper. The Walmart management had finally caught on. She had 24 hours to move the vehicle or it would be towed. Panic set in as she realized she had nowhere else to go. All the other parking lots she'd scouted had similar policies or were too dangerous for a teenage girl alone. That night, she sat in her car in a parking lot, wrestling with her options. She could try to tough it out for 2 more weeks, moving every night, risking police attention. She could reach out to a teacher or counselor, but that would mean questions, possible intervention, maybe even losing her spot at Stanford if they found out she had no guardian. Or she could swallow her pride and ask for help. The next morning, she found herself standing outside Mrs. Rodriguez's classroom before school, her carefully constructed walls finally crumbling. "I need help," she said simply when her teacher arrived. "I don't have anywhere to live." The story tumbled out in fragments: her mother's death, the medical bills, the months in the car, the constant fear of discovery. Mrs. Rodriguez listened without interruption, her eyes filling with tears. that Maya refused to let herself shed. "Oh, Maya," she said when the confession ended. "You incredible, stubborn, brilliant girl. Why didn't you tell anyone?" "I couldn't risk losing everything," Maya whispered. "I promised my mom I'd graduate. I promised I'd go to college." Mrs. Rodriguez pulled her into a fierce hug. "And you will. But you don't have to do it alone anymore." The next 2 weeks were a whirlwind. Mrs. Rodriguez and her husband, both empty nesters, insisted Maya stay in their guest room. The school counselor brought into the loop helped navigate the legal complexities of Maya's situation. Teachers who learned the truth rallied around her, organizing a collection to help with college supplies and travel costs. Maya struggled with accepting help, each act of kindness feeling like both a gift and an admission of failure. But slowly she began to understand that strength wasn't just about surviving alone, it was also about having the courage to let others in. Graduation day dawned bright and clear. Maya stood in front of the mirror in Mrs. Rodriguez's guest room, adjusting her valedictorian stole over her cap and gown. She looked different than she had 8 months ago. Not just older, but somehow more solid, as if surviving had given her substance. "Your mother would be so proud," Mrs. Rodriguez said from the doorway. Maya nodded, fingering the small jade pendant around her neck, the only jewelry of her mother's she had kept. "I know," she said softly. "I can feel her." The ceremony was a blur of camera flashes and applause. When Maya's name was called as valedictorian, the entire graduating class rose to their feet. She had prepared a speech about perseverance and the power of education, carefully generic and inspiring. But standing at the podium looking out at the sea of faces, teachers who had unknowingly fed her classmates, who had unknowingly motivated her community members, who had unknowingly sheltered her, she decided to tell the truth. 6 months ago, she began her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "I wrote my AP Literature College essay about resilience. My teacher told me I was holding back, that the best essays show who you really are. I couldn't follow her advice then, but I can now." She talked about her mother's sacrifice, about the nights in the car, about the mornings in gas station bathrooms. She talked about the kindness of strangers who didn't know they were being kind, about teachers who gave more than they knew, about a community that caught her when she finally fell. She talked about the promise of education not as an abstract ideal, but as a literal lifeline. "Now, they say it takes a village to raise a child," she concluded, her eyes finding Mrs. Rodriguez in the crowd. "But sometimes it takes a child to teach a village about the true meaning of strength. Each of you, whether you knew it or not, was part of my village. You kept me going when I wanted to quit. You reminded me daily that there was something worth fighting for. And while I stand here as valedictorian, this achievement belongs to all of us." The silence that followed was deafening, broken finally by a single clap that grew into thunderous applause. Maya saw teachers wiping their eyes, classmates looking at her with new understanding, parents hugging their children a little tighter. After the ceremony, she was surrounded by well-wishers. Job offers for the summer poured in from parents who owned businesses. Promises of care packages for college came from teachers. Invitations to stay in touch came from classmates, who suddenly saw her as more than just the smart girl who sat in the front row. Mr. Thompson approached with an envelope. "The math department took up a collection," he said gruffly, clearly uncomfortable with emotion, "for college expenses. Don't argue, consider it an investment in your future Fields Medal." Maya accepted the envelope with trembling hands, too overwhelmed to speak. The boy who had teased her for never going to parties awkwardly offered his congratulations and an apology. The girl who had invited her to study groups but never to hangouts asked if they could keep in touch at Stanford, where she was also headed. As the crowd thinned, Maya found herself alone with Mrs. Rodriguez and her husband. They stood together watching the sun set over the football field where moments ago 400 teenagers had been launched into their futures. "Thank you," Maya said simply, "for everything." "Thank you," Mrs. Rodriguez replied, "for reminding me why I became a teacher." They drove home, what a strange word for Maya to use in comfortable silence. That night, for the first time in almost a year, Maya slept deeply and dreamlessly without one ear alert for danger or one hand on her car keys. The summer passed quickly. Maya worked 2 jobs, saving money and enjoying the novelty of a steady address. She spent evenings with Mrs. Rodriguez, who helped her shop for dorm supplies and taught her to cook simple meals. They talked about college, about literature, about life. Sometimes they talked about Lynn, and Maya found that the memories hurt less when shared. On the day before Maya left for Stanford, she visited her mother's grave for the first time since the funeral. She had avoided it during her months of homelessness, unable to bear the thought of her mother seeing what she had become. But now she knelt by the headstone with a different story to tell. "I did it, Mom," she whispered, arranging the flowers she'd brought. "I graduated top of the class. I'm going to Stanford. I kept my promise." The wind rustled through the cemetery trees, and for a moment Maya could almost hear her mother's voice. "In America, knowledge is the only thing they cannot take from you." "Now, you were right," Maya said, touching the headstone gently. "But you forgot to mention all the other things they can't take: courage, kindness, the ability to accept help, the strength to be vulnerable. I learned those things, too." The next morning, Mrs. Rodriguez drove Maya to the airport. They had said their goodbyes the night before, but standing at the security checkpoint, Maya found herself reluctant to let go. "You'll do amazing things," Mrs. Rodriguez said firmly. "But remember, asking for help isn't weakness. It's wisdom." Maya nodded, shouldering her backpack, the same one that had once held everything she owned, now just one of many bags filled with the accumulated generosity of a community that had finally seen her. As the plane lifted off, Maya pressed her face to the window, watching the city that had been both her crucible and her salvation fade into miniature. Somewhere down there was a Walmart parking lot, a high school, a library, a dozen places that had unknowingly sheltered her. Somewhere down there was Mrs. Rodriguez, probably already planning her first care package. Maya had started her senior year with nothing but determination and a promise to a dead woman. She was ending it with a full scholarship, a support network, and the knowledge that she could survive anything. The girl who had once made herself invisible had learned the power of being seen. The flight attendant announced the cruising altitude, and Maya pulled out her laptop, a graduation gift from the tutoring center where she'd worked. She had an essay to write for her freshman seminar, something about a meaningful life experience. This time, she wouldn't hold back. "The first night I slept in my car," she typed, "I thought my life was over. I was wrong. It was just beginning." Outside the airplane window, the sun climbed higher, painting the clouds in shades of gold and possibility. Maya Chen, valedictorian, Stanford student survivor, and thriver, flew toward her future with her mother's voice in her heart and a village of supporters at her back. She had learned that some promises are too important to break, that some dreams are too precious to abandon, and that sometimes the hardest thing and the right thing are the same. The homeless girl who graduated top of her class was homeless no more, not because she had found a house, but because she had found a home in the hearts of those who had refused to let her fall. And that, more than any diploma or acceptance letter, was the true measure of her success.